Tonight is a bit of a reunion, and before I get into some prepared remarks, what I love about tonight is there's so many former LAPD members here. Bill's security detail from the day is here. Our great former mayor, Jim Hahn, is here. And it was quite a group of us back in the day that recognized under Jim's leadership we had to turn this city around, that there was a serious problem happening and it couldn't continue the way it was continuing. And I just want to highlight that the working together between Bill Bratton and Jim Hahn was legendary. Actually should be written about because it's a case study in how to get things done and get them done well in spite of or against all odds. And I just want to take a special moment, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your leadership. I will tell one story, though. I'll be quick. I know we got a long night. I was just reminding Jim of this story. In the height of the appointment and the selection process, there was a number of people that were not happy with the fact that Bernie Parks may get fired. And so there was a lot of marches that were going on, and they had a nice little trick that some people would do was to burn me in effigy outside of Parker Center. And I'm sitting in the mayor's office with his chief of staff and his representative on the police department. And I said, Mr. Mayor, you know, they're burning me outside of Parker Center right now. And my wife is disturbed. She's watching it on ABC. And in his very calm tone that we would all expect, you'll be fine, and walks out the door. And I was, you're right. Well, allow me to set the stage. In fact, allow me to pull back the curtain and reveal what was going on behind the scenes before Bill took over LAPD in 2002. The Rodney King fires were long gone, but the racial tensions still burned. Crime, especially violent crime, was soaring. Morale was so bad that the LAPD was losing more officers than it was enrolling. The police academy was literally empty. The officers we did have were using 8-year-old computers in their cars, but the 400 street gangs were fully staffed. Meanwhile, 9/11 had everybody on edge about global terrorism. And in the aftermath of the Rampart scandal, the feds eyeballed the department with every move that LAPD and was operating under a federal consent decree. Things were bad and getting worse. I had to present to the mayor a candidate foolish enough to want the chief's job after we fired Bernard Parks, and he was still a hero to many members of the community. It was in that backdrop that the newly elected Mayor Hahn asked me to be president of the Police Commission. I turned him down twice, knowing the heavy politics involved. On the third try, I asked Mayor Hahn a critical question. Would he give me the freedom to make the changes to LAPD that I felt were needed without politics creeping in? The mayor said yes, and I became the head of the police commission. Obviously, LA did not need a new chief of police. We needed Batman. Well, guess who stepped up and applied? That bashful Irishman right there. The thing is, in the beginning, I didn't think Bill was right for the job. Not until his interview and spending many times together and many dinners. The rest, as they say, is history. We found our Batman. Mayor Hahn did what was right instead of what would have been politically expedient. How refreshing. Lesson learned. As an elected or appointed official, both Jim Hahn and Bill Bratton was doing what was right for those they served instead of worrying about their job. And when that happens, magic happens. And what did Chief Bratton accomplish in his 7 years? He reached out to his critics. He demanded excellence. He diversified the force. He raised morale. He introduced computer mapping, pushed down crime rates to levels not seen since 1950, and opened up $1 billion in new police facilities, thereby cementing himself as the most impactful law enforcement figure in the nation. Even civil rights attorney Connie Rice, one of his early skeptics, called what he accomplished, quote, a cultural transformation of LAPD. Did he step on some toes? He sure did. LA Magazine called Bill Bratton, quote, blunt as a billy club. So yes, he stepped on anything that got in his way. In the very end, Bill helped save a very troubled and distressful city, winning over his critics and the hearts, perhaps, of the most critical and tough audience a police chief could ever have, the beat cops. He restored class. He restored courage. He restored professionalism to a force that was dying to soak it up. As a great leader once said, it does not take many words to tell the truth, and Bill brought blunt and refreshing truth to a city when it needed it the most. Indeed, Bill was exactly the right person for the job, and we were paying tribute tonight to his legacy and the landmark work that he has done, and celebrating him tonight as Los Angeles reels from yet another set of incredible challenges. You want to come back, Bill? Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to honor, along with all of you, my dear friend and our former chief, William J. Bratton.
Great. So this segment is called The Essentials of Public Leadership, a Conversation. And I thought where we might begin, Rick, is where we left off. You were good enough to say that when you were head of the police commission, Bill may not have been your first choice. So before we get into how that decision came about, why don't you, if you could talk a little bit about what your vision was when you came on to be head of the police commission in this real time of turbulence here in the city.
Sure. I mean, I got instructions from the mayor. You have to go clean the place up. Go in and study what's going wrong. Because what was happening in Los Angeles is crime in Los Angeles was going up dramatically. But if you go into the county side that was overseen by the sheriffs, they were not having anywhere near the crime spikes that we were. We had a system, a discipline system, among many things that was just a mistake. But what I wanted, what the mayor wanted, and the commission wanted, was somebody coming in here that had the courage, the experience, and the backbone, the expertise, and the competence to literally redesign the department in terms of its efficiency and ability to reduce crime in the best of ways and respecting the community through that process. So for me, it was somebody that had a great depth of knowledge. There was no doubt that Bill had the great depth of knowledge, and there was a lot of competing forces at the time. But, I mean, I will just tell you that it was obviously my ignorance at the time, not quickly recognizing that Bill was the right candidate initially. But I think actually me being a little bit reserved about it was probably better because it allowed Bill and I to spend more time together. And I would just also say this at the time, which I find fascinating. It was a time that we had to clearly replace a very popular chief of police, and who was very popular in the black community, and who literally, I tell people, looked like he came out of central casting. You know, the way he wore the uniform. The policies were just terrible under him. But what was absolutely politically, quote unquote, incorrect was then picking this white guy with a Bostonian accent, an Irish guy, to come in from the outside, because the bet was it was going to be an insider that was going to bubble up to the top. And the union at the time was upset. I mean, there were so many people upset. The union wouldn't even talk to me, and I wouldn't talk to Jim. And how about that? That in spite of all of that, he comes in and through his knowledge and discipline and expertise, turns every critic around and became the most popular chief of police, not because of his sheer handsomeness, but because everybody was literally safer. And the cops felt they were doing something that was really meaningful, and they were proud to be a cop again.
So, Bill, let's come to you. You just come off just an incredible stage in your career in the largest city in America, in New York. There had been a real revolution there. It's covered in the movie Gotham, which we had a chance to preview at the policy school. Just tremendous change that you wrought there. What attracted you in the first place about the opportunity to serve here in Los Angeles?
When I left the NYPD in 1996, after falling out with Mayor Giuliani, I thought my police career, my time in the public sector was over. That I had risen to the zenith of American policing, the largest police department in America, 55,000 personnel. And I thought I was now going to go into the private sector and spend the rest of my life in that sector. But missed policing terribly, and over the next 6 years, that longing to come back into the profession only grew. The events of 9/11, it changed everybody's lives in this country, this room, changed mine in that it accelerated that desire to come back into public life, to serve, to create change, and particularly in the police profession that was once again, as a profession, nationally suffering its image. And the opportunity arose to come to work in LA as part of the consent monitoring team. The company I was working with in the private sector competed to become the federal monitor, and I was one of the subject matter experts that they brought in. So for a period of a year, I had an opportunity to interact with Mayor Hahn and his administration implementing that consent decree in a very hostile environment at the LAPD. They did not want us there. They made that quite clear, Chief Parks and then his successor. But at the same time, it gave me an opportunity to interact with Mayor Hahn and his team, Tim McCosker and others. It gave them a chance to interact with me. And we formed a very successful collaboration. So that when the time came that he made the very difficult political decision not to reappoint Chief Parks, and that was an incredible decision. Most of you in this room, I don't think are fully aware that when he made the decision to remove Chief Parks, he understood it was probably going to remove his ability to successfully run for re-election. And he was right. That removal basically ended his political career. But he made that decision for all the right reasons. The other decision he made was appointing Rick as head of his police commission, and there's dedication also. Rick taking on a job that he understood was going to create, as he described, incredible tensions, fear in his family, that he was taking on this unpopular task. I was desperate to get into the position of chief of police when it opened up, and I campaigned for it. I literally campaigned to be the chief of police in Los Angeles. I should run for mayor because I ran a pretty damn good police campaign.
I could learn from you.
I came out to LA armed with my propaganda packages, all my newspaper clips, my awards, etc. I had been very popular in New York, despite my falling out with Mayor Giuliani. And I thought I would be the front runner in the Chiefs race. Little did I know I was the dark horse. And particularly this guy did not want me at all. He made it known through acquaintances that tell Bratton not to apply because we're not going to appoint him. And I went to see John Mack, the head of the Urban League, and it was like walking naked into an ice freezer. That John made it clear that we're not happy we're losing our very popular black chief. We're damn sure not going to hire some white guy from New York City. And so, despite those odds, I had something very much in my favor. I had a mayor who understood me and believed that I was the person that might be able to do the job. Took some convincing for this guy and his commission. But most importantly, I had a wife named Ricky. And all that transpired since stepping away from the NYPD in my career, LAPD, NYPD again, I owe to her. Because she ultimately gave up her career in television to allow me to take this job and move out here. And so the three people responsible for me getting that chief of police job are in this room, and I owe an incredible debt of gratitude to them. And based on what Rick has described in terms of the impact on this city and many of you, you all owe a debt of gratitude to the three of them also. And I certainly do.
Rick, I want to come back to you because, as you mentioned, you were asked twice, you turned down twice, and then you took this very important role at a pivotal time in the history of the city. You obviously had a sense of how much pressure was coming your way when you took on the role. How clear or true was your evaluation of what you were stepping into to what you actually ended up experiencing?
Well, let me just say this, that Mayor Hahn did not give up, obviously, and I'm grateful that you didn't and finally convinced me to take it, because in my life it was literally one of the best experiences I've ever had. As difficult as it was, one of the most rewarding experiences I ever had. And it was far more complicated and intense than even I anticipated going into it. Because I knew that there was going to be a good likelihood that we were not going to be reappointing Bernie Parks. And I knew of his popularity in the community. And what I also knew was, with Jim's support, we weren't going to be bound by, you have to pick from within the department, you have to have a certain ethnicity, you've got to have a certain gender. It was, you go find the right person, Rick, to turn this department around. Since Bill opened the door on this, my initial concern was what he mentioned was the falling out with Giuliani. And Jim and I talked about it. And when I told him, I said, I'm probably going to be recommending Bill Bratton to you. And he said, is he going to listen to me? And I said, I promise you he will. And he will be a good soldier in the field for you. And obviously he proved that to be true. But the guy that I got some of the best insight on Bill was Bill Clinton, who I called, and he took a lunch meeting and just couldn't speak more highly of him. And of course, when you meet him and you go through his background. But listen, the other thing is, you're not only managing the community and having to listen to the community and do right by the community. One of my fellow commissioners, Dave Cunningham, is here. You know, I had 4 other commissioners that you had to bring along with you. And, you know, everybody has different points of view, but we all came together on it. But it was complicated for sure, but it was a great challenge, a good, fun challenge.
I wanted to go back to the quotation from earlier from Connie Rice and the culture change that you wrought, Bill, and ask first, there were two levels of culture change that seemed needed to happen. One was within the department, and the second was between the department and the communities of Los Angeles. And so I wondered if you could speak to, first, how much of a surprise was the level of relationship building and culture changing that needed to happen? And then second, how did you go about creating that culture change both internally and then externally?
First off, I came into this position with my eyes wide open. I had done my homework that I always do. A lot of research, who are the players, what are the issues, what are the tensions. And one of the things I do professionally is transformational change of organizations in their cultures. I get it, I understand it. I know how to, in a sense, look under the covers, look under the sheets. And that was part of the desire to come to LA because there's so much to fix. It was like I was like a kid in a candy store. Everywhere you looked, there was a problem. And I'm a great believer in the old adage that if you don't have a crisis, create one. Well, I had no shortage of crises in the LAPD. And why do I say that? Because with crises, you accelerate change. With crises, you find it easier oftentimes to get people to come with you, to join you. And I love the policing profession. I love cops, but I understand them. I understand what makes them tick. There's two things you can always say about cops. They hate the way things are, and they hate change. So when you understanding that, you know how to deal with them. I've been given a lot of credit in this evening and the award that you're giving, but I was also very fortunate, and Rick can appreciate this because he interviewed them. The people I chose to be my leadership team were all the people who competed for the job of chief. Jim McDonald, Sharon Papa, Earl Pasinger, an extraordinary, talented group of people who were all unified in their belief that they loved the LAPD, they knew it could do better, they wanted it to do better, and they wanted to lead that department to do better. The good news is that leadership team, there's been a succession of them who become your police chief. You got Jimmy McDonald now. Jimmy McDonald and I worked together in the Boston Police Department in 1976. He was my number 2 when I came into the LAPD. Charlie Beck, captain at Rampart in downtown. So I'll accept the praise and the credit, et cetera, but please understand that I'm very inclusive in my leadership style. Jim Collins, get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, get them in the right seat. The LAPD did not lack for talent, did not lack for professionalism, did not lack for caring about this city and this community. There's a large group of officers here tonight that I learned so much from. They're my security detail. And I'd spend hours. They were my partners. They taught me about this department, how professional it was, how caring they were, and they taught me about the culture of this place. There's no police department in America that's as professionally oriented as the LAPD. It is an extraordinary group of men and women who there's an expression here in time of this budget crisis, it's very appropriate. Jim McDonald gave me this expression. The LAPD, too few who for too long have been asked to do too much with too little. They were undersupported, under-resourced, under-led in many respects for so much of their history. So the good news is all those crises allowed opportunities to accelerate change. And I had great support and guidance and collaboration with Rick, the commission, the mayor, and the public. And there's another gentleman in the room I have to point out because he was so significant in educating me about this city, but particularly its black population. And that's Fred Booker, retired Lieutenant Fred Booker. Booker basically opened the city up to me in the sense of understanding its history, its tensions, and exposed me to people like Connie Rice and so many others, Sweet Alice, that the understanding of all the different tensions in the city, how could we get them all on the same platform to work together? And I loved it. I loved every minute I worked out here, even in the midst of the MacArthur Park crises, even in the midst of all the different scandals, et cetera, and crises we had to deal with. Why did I love it? Because I love the people I work with. And it wasn't that I solved the problems. It wasn't that Rick solved them or the mayor solved them. It was the men and women that we got to lead and work with that solved them eventually. And they made this city a much safer place.
I want to close with a couple questions, one for each of you. Rick, one of the things that we talk about at the policy school is we use a phrase a lot, a cross-sector leader. One that may be working on policy issues within the government sector, maybe the nonprofit sector, or even the private sector. You, to me, in many ways, personify a cross-sector leader. At the same time, you had businesses to run, yet you still made time for the civic and safety of the city that you love. And so I wanted to get a sense of what is not every business leader in Los Angeles has done what you have done over the course of decades here in Los Angeles at low or no pay. What has been the impetus or what has prompted you to step beyond your business role to engage in the life of Los Angeles? And second, and this is not a leading question, but looking back on your time 20 years ago as head of the police commission and being here in Los Angeles in the time that we are in now, what's your impression of what it's going to take to return Los Angeles to that city of angels?
Well, I'll try to be brief on those two because I could go on for a long time on that. On the first question, and I think many of the reasons Bill and I got along so well is, one, we both understood our roles. I was the commissioner, he was the chief. He's operating the department. And the commission was there to support and implement and help him along. Also, hold him accountable, for sure. And some of the best decisions that we ever made were actually in this room. Bill and I would have breakfast in this room once or twice a week to chart out what was going on, compare notes, have our plans aligned, et cetera. And
Best pancakes in the city.
But what drives me to it, and again, I go back to, I think, what Bill and I share, is I love complex problems that you have to unbundle, reorganize, and put them back together, and then you get to enjoy and watch the change, the productive, healthy change that it makes. So as complex as it was at LAPD, knowing going into it, that was the attraction to me. My biggest fear was, am I going to really be able to, am I going to be given the power to do what I think is right? How to unbundle it. It's like when I was asked to be the chair of USC, it was the worst crisis in 140 years of USC, but it was a fascinating, complex problem to change the culture of a massive university around. So I loved every minute too. And, working alongside of Bill, watching Bill every day was just a thrill and a blessing. Learned a lot from him and his leadership skills. But mostly, I loved the impact that we were having. The neighborhoods being safer. The people living in projects that were completely abandoned, literally in terms of their safety. Nickerson Gardens, Imperial Gardens, actually starting to feel like people listened to them again. Cared for them, could go outside their doors. It was so touching and rewarding. How could you not dedicate your life and your time to do that and figure out how to still run your business? So it was great. What we need to do in the future is very simple. It's what's tried and true. We need to elect and hire competent people with a track record of a skill set that actually pertains to the job they've been given. And in business, you would hire somebody that is the best and the brightest in a particular field and then empower them to do their job, et cetera, et cetera. We haven't done that in this city. And, and what happens is if there's an issue with leadership at the top, then all the decisions that are made below that and the leaders below that person that are appointed, it all starts falling apart. And that's what we've had in the city for the last decade plus, and it just continues on. So going back to why we picked Bill, he checked that box. Best and the brightest, knew how to lead, and would attract the best and the brightest. Because unless you're the best and the brightest don't want to work for you.
Chief, I want to close with a question, more of a question, but also based on a story that you told me over dinner a few weeks ago. And this gets to the other side. It goes back actually to the quotation I read earlier from the Broken Windows article, in which Kelly and Wilson say that oftentimes in policing we can focus on so-called crime fighting without thinking about the relationship and community building that needs to happen. And you told me the story of when you were wrapping up your time here of service to Los Angeles, that you went back around to the different neighborhoods and you reconnected with Alice, who you met before. And in a conversation with her, she looked you right in the eye and said that you see us. And I wonder if you could tell that story and really what she was saying, and as evidence of the culture change that you were building and built between the LAPD and the communities of Los Angeles.
Thank you for that question. That he's referencing a community organizer down in Watts that Fred, when he was introducing me around, particularly into the minority communities, black community, Hispanic community, that one of the people he introduced me to was this community organizer, Sweet Alice. And my wife and I became very close to her. Ricky would volunteer as an elf at Christmas time for her toy distribution program down there. And a major challenge for any police chief in this city, because of its history of racial tensions, is whether you're white, black, Latino, to understand the various communities, their frustrations, their fears, their concerns. And Fred Booker basically allowed me entrance into the black community to understand those frustrations and fears, as did Connie Rice. And what you're referencing is when Ricky and I were leaving to go back to New York, we were making the rounds of people we had met, and we went down to see Sweet Alice, and we had a very emotional goodbye. And as we were saying goodbye, Sweet Alice, in this lovely southern accent that she has, one of those who migrated from the cotton fields of the South here to California in the 50s and 60s, she says, "You know why we like you so much, Chief Bratton?" And I said, "No, Alice, why, Sweet Alice, why is that?" "Because you see us. You really see us." And that expression says it all, in that we talked about changing culture. One of the reasons I think I get along so well with cops is that they understand I see them. I see what their issues are, because I try to learn. I don't think I have all the answers. The answers come from them. The answers come from the black community and the Latino community. So it is this idea of, if you want to change organizations, if you want to change communities, if you want them to collaborate with each other, you have to understand them, you have to see them. And I think I've gotten very good at that. If I may just diverge from that question, there's something I'd like to impart, because we are here tonight honoring, in a sense, you are certainly honoring me, but in many respects we're honoring James Wilson, who was a friend, who was a mentor, who I had the good fortune to interact with, share thoughts and ideas, First met him after the 1982 article was published, him and George Kelling both. I had lived broken windows in the Boston Police Department as a young beat cop, white cop working in an all-black neighborhood, and seeing serious crime, but also seeing the deterioration of all those broken windows, the abandoned cars, the graffiti, the street prostitution, the narcotics dealing, what people saw every day that was creating fear in their lives. So when I read that Broken Windows article, I had lived it, and it resonated with me. And I made it a point to meet these two great, great thinkers, and they became mentors, significant players in my life. And Wilson has written many books. He is, I think, underappreciated. I'm so glad the school is really celebrating him. And I'm very appreciative of being the first recipient of this Lifetime Achievement Award. I've received many awards in my career over 50 years. This is the first Lifetime Achievement Award I've ever gotten. I'm feeling pretty good that I'm still alive to receive it, because oftentimes it's given after you're gone. But one of the things that resonated with me with Wilson and Kelling was they saw me, they got me. And what did they get about me that resonated with them? Was the idea that early on in my career I was exposed to the writings of Sir Robert Peel, who created the Metropolitan Police in London in 1829. And he had 9 principles of policing, and the first was the basic mission for which the police exist is to prevent crime and disorder. The other 8 principles spoke to the importance of police doing it with minimum force, doing it with and for the community, not to the community. But that basic 5 words, to prevent crime and disorder, in the 70s and 80s, we gave up dealing with disorder. We gave up preventing crime. We focused on responding to it. 911. Joe Friday, the great hero of mine, Dragnet, what was he known for? Solving crime after the fact. The thing I came to understand early in my career was the importance of both dealing with crime and disorder at the same time, with the focus of preventing them, not responding to them. And so the Broken Windows article resonated with me in that respect. And so as we celebrate me tonight, thank you, we're celebrating also the idea that Wilson and Kelling and Peel understood, and I still think it's the greatest idea in policing, the policing profession, that we exist to prevent crime and disorder. And while I'm celebrated for being one of the biggest practitioners of broken windows policing, I'd like to read you, in closing this comment, a quote from Wilson when he was being interviewed for a book about the turnaround of crime in New York City. And it just reads, it's 1 paragraph. James Q. Wilson has no doubt about why crime fell so dramatically in New York. And the reason is not national trends or Rudy Giuliani's leadership or Bratton's adoption of broken windows. Rather, all the strategies Bratton implemented were designed to change the way the police saw their job. The biggest change in policing in this country that's occurred is usually associated with Bill Bratton, Wilson said in 2011, and that's a correct association. Thank you, Jim. He made a huge difference, but people mistake what the change was. They say he adopted the broken windows theory. Well, I'm not sure he did, and if he did, I'm not sure it made much difference in the crime rate. What he really did, his fundamental contribution, was to persuade the police that your job is not to make arrests, your job is to prevent crime. And that's what it's all about. That's what the police profession is all about, to prevent it from happening in the first place. And that was the cultural change that we brought to New York and to Los Angeles, that the goal is not to make arrests, not to put people in handcuffs, but to remove the conditions that require that to happen. So that's Wilson's contribution, and it's he saw me and I saw him.
Well, tonight, Bill, we all see you and appreciate you and are grateful for you. And so once again, please join me in appreciating our 2025 James Q. Wilson Award recipient, Bill Bratton.
Bill Bratton.